everyone. I'm Tyler Pittman, IFAS Agriculture Extension Agent in Gilchrist County, and I'm glad you could join us today for this stop on the virtual peanut field tour for 2021. I'm here today with Barry Tillman, the IFAS Peanut Breeder, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about the 2021 peanut variety trials going on here at the center at Live Oak.
Yeah, so this is one of our 4 locations of variety trials of peanut around the state. We have one in Citra, Florida, one here in Live Oak, one in Marianna, and one out in Jay, Florida, in the western part of the state. And it's a way that we can look at the yield potential and how peanuts are best, how they perform best in different environments. So in this particular case, it's a very sandy soil, good rotation here, so we should see really high yields.
So Barry, you mentioned something in that, what you just said about yield potential. Could you elaborate a little bit more for the folks watching this field day of what yield potential is and how that translates from small plot variety trials like this to on farm and actual using it in your crop from year to year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we do the yield tests in very good conditions, excellent conditions. So we're looking at low disease, excellent fertility and things like that. And so we get what we can best term is the actual potential of the variety. How is it going to yield in the best conditions? Now that doesn't always translate to the farm situations because we're picking the best land. So in another part of the field it might not be quite as good. So overall yield, realized yield for the grower is going to be a little bit lower. But what we can say is that potential can be maximized by learning how to grow those varieties for their strengths and minimizing their weaknesses. For instance, some varieties differ in their disease resistance profile. So if a farmer has a problem with white mold or nematodes, they need to choose a variety that has more resistance, more tolerance to those 2 diseases. And there's some variation in white mold and leaf spot as well, not as much. Typically we still need to spray all the peanut varieties that we have with a good fungicide program to minimize the leaf spot and white mold. But we have some good varieties for tolerance to tomato spotted wilt. In fact, there's a new one we'll talk about as well for spotted wilt resistance. And nematodes are also a big issue where there's not a lot of rotation in the sandier ground that nematodes tend to like we are here in Live Oak. And so the TIF NV High OL is a very good nematode resistant variety to look at in that situation. So that's kind of the disease part of it. But if you look at the yield data, and I encourage you to go look at the Florida Peanut Team website. We have some yield data there. You can also go to the University of Georgia statewide variety testing website and you'll see the yield there. What you'll notice is that over time our newer varieties have sort of increased in yield potential over what we're growing now primarily, which is still Georgia 06G. But the question is, how does a grower realize that potential? How do they get their farms to maximize the potential of these new varieties? So one of the things to think about is they're just different in how they grow. They're not all the same as 06G. They have, obviously we talked about different disease resistance, that's important. We also should look at the vine size. That's an important aspect too. 06G is kind of a little bit smaller peanut, has a smaller stature, more of a bunch type that we'd call it, compared to something much larger like our Flow Run 331 or 297 or even Georgia 12Y that have a much larger peanut vine. And those cases we need to manage that vine growth to maximize potential. And that could mean a growth regulator. It could mean less seed per foot of row to try to not get such a tall bush out of that. So some of those things that growers can think about on their farm and how their conditions actually are to help maximize potential of these new varieties.
Right, so Barry, I think that's such a great way to look at choosing a peanut variety for our producers out there. Is what is the potential of it? And what can that bring me in terms of the challenges I've been facing from year to year? Yeah. But I like what you said, it's different from 06G, so we can't grow it like we did 06G.
Exactly.
And so if you're going to think about trying a new variety or something like that, it's always great for our producers to contact your local extension agents or even contact you to get a better idea of how that variety needs to be treated differently than your traditional 06G. So that being said, is there anything new on the horizon that our peanut producers here in the Suwannee Valley should know about or might be interested in?
Yeah, we did release a new variety last year. It's called Flow Run T as in Tom 61. We put the T in there because it has very good tolerance to tomato spotted wilt virus. It's not as big of an issue here in the Suwannee Valley as it is in our area and even up into Georgia. But tomato spotted wilt can be a really serious disease, and we've seen a lot of it in the past few years in our area. So that's one of the things we're doing. That doesn't mean it doesn't perform well here. It does perform well here, so I think it's an option for our growers to look at across the Florida peanut growing regions. So it's a new variety called Flow Run T61. We're growing about 50 acres of foundation seed this year, so it'll be a couple of years before there's enough seed to really be generally available, but be on the lookout for that one.
Right, and that's always a great thing to remember for our producers here in the Suwannee Valley is, you know, it's developed to deal with a problem somewhere else. But like we've seen in so many of our crops and from year to year, somebody else's problem can be our problem tomorrow. And so it's good to hear about that and know what you guys are working on up there at Marianna. So that's it with our 2021 peanut variety trials. And like we mentioned earlier, if you ever have questions about these, feel free to contact your local extension agent or reach out to Barry, and check out the links below to some of the reports on the variety trials if you've got more questions or interested on some different varieties, maybe trying some things out. We'll see you at the next stop. Thank you.